African leaders are pushing to have colonial-era crimes recognized, criminalized, and addressed through reparations. At a conference in the Algerian capital Algiers, diplomats and leaders convened to advance an African Union resolution passed at a meeting earlier this year calling for justice and reparations for victims of colonialism. Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Astaf said Algeria's experience under French rule highlighted the need to seek compensation and reclaim stolen property. A legal framework, he added, would ensure restitution is seen as neither a gift nor a favor. Africa is entitled to demand the official and explicit recognition of the crimes committed against its people during the colonial period, an indispensable first step towards addressing the consequences of that era, for which African countries and people continue to pay a heavy price in terms of exclusion, marginalization, and backwardness, as Staff said. International conventions and statutes accepted by the majority of countries have outlawed practices including slavery, torture, and apartheid. The United Nations Charter prohibits the seizure of territory by force but has not explicitly referenced colonialism. The absence was central to African Union's February summit, where leaders discussed a proposal to develop a unified position on reparations and formally define colonization as a crime against humanity. The economic cost of colonialism in Africa is believed to be staggering, with some estimates in the trillions. European powers extracted natural resources, often through brutal methods, amassing vast profits from gold, rubber, diamonds, and other minerals, while leaving local populations impoverished. African states have in recent years intensified demands for the return of looted artifacts still housed in European museums. Attaf said it was no mistake that the conference was held in Algeria, a country that suffered some of the most brutal forms of French colonial rule and fought a bloody war between 1954 and 1962 to win its independence. Its impact was far-reaching. Nearly 1 million European settlers held greater political, economic, and social privileges, even though Algeria was legally part of France and its men were conscripted during the Second World War. Hundreds of thousands of people died in the country's revolution, during which French forces tortured detainees, disappeared suspects, and devastated villages as part of counter-insurgency strategy to maintain their grip on power. Our continent retains the example of Algeria's bitter ordeal as a rare model, almost without equivalent in history, in its nature, its logic, and its practices, Attaf said. Algeria's experience has long informed its position on the disputed Western Sahara, a former Spanish colony claimed by neighboring Morocco and pro-independence Polisario France. Attaf on Sunday framed it as a case of unfinished decolonization, echoing the African Union's former stance, even as a growing number of member states have moved to support Morocco's claim to the territory. He called it Africa's last colony and lauded the indigenous Sahrawis' fight to assert their legitimate and legal right to self-determination as affirmed and continuously reaffirmed by the international legality and the UN doctrine on decolonization. Algeria has for decades pressed for colonization to be tackled through international law, even as its leaders tread carefully to avoid inflaming tensions with France, where the war's legacy remains politically sensitive. French President Emmanuel Macron in 2017 described elements of the history as a crime against humanity, but stopped short of issuing an official apology, but rather implored Algerians not to dwell on its past injustices. Mohamed Aris Kid Farid, a member of Algeria's parliament, told the media that the compensation had to be more than symbolic, noting Algerian artifacts looted by France have yet to be returned. That includes Baba Mezo, a 16th century canoe that remains in Brest. Earlier in November, it was reported on similar calls in the Caribbean, with a delegation from the body leading that regional slavery reparations movement preparing to visit the UK to advocate on its issue. Caribbean governments have also been calling for recognition of the lasting legacy of colonialism and enslavement, reparative justice from former colonizers, including a full formal apology and formal financial reparations.